Greetings, family and friends. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of All Things Faith Walk. This is the place where we talk about the Word of God in meaningful, practical terms, in ways that we can take the Word of God to strengthen our lives, to balance our lives, to make us holistic and healthy. We have a guest today by the name of Autumn Swain, a person who has done a ton of work in this area that can take us into a deeper understanding of what it means, what it looks like to live a holistic life. Sometimes we tend to focus on specific areas of our lives, particularly maybe physical, maybe spiritual, maybe emotional. Maybe we're so focused on having healthy relationships, but we're not taking care of our bodies physically or spiritually. We are a complete being with several domains. So what we'll be talking about today is how do we do life? Do we live our lives while giving each domains of our life, each area of our being, the attention and the care that it needs in order to be complete and holistic. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So I want to welcome Autumn again for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Autumn.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm actually super excited because a lot of times when I get to speak about my passion, I'm starting from physical health or like a different specific component of wellness, but I actually love talking about spiritual formation as it relates to every one of these other spaces. And I'll speak to in a minute as I introduce myself, like the six primary areas I focused on when I did my doctoral research and just helping leaders and communities in their pursuit of shalom. And my argument is just that, like you so beautifully said, like our the areas that comprise our well-being and our pursuit of wholeness are integrated so intimately that if we attempt to compartmentalize them, it will be a failed effort. But we will feel most fulfilled and our capacity will skyrocket when we recognize the integrative nature of our spiritual formation as it relates to our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health, our social and economic well-being. And so just a little bit about myself. Currently I do coaching. I have a membership platform where I basically my passion is to really practically, I love that you use that word, practically help people integrate rhythms into their day-to-day life in this pursuit of holistic well-being. Because what I know, and me being a busy working entrepreneurial mom of two boys, and I do a lot of volunteering focused on loving your neighbors, and my life is full to say the least. But I always prioritize these rhythms because if you have a foundation of aligned living, you will just be able to kind of navigate anything. Like you can have stressful, challenging, chaotic seasons come your way, and you're going to better be able to get through them when you're aligned. And so I'm very passionate about this because life is full. We need very, very practical applications in order to do this well, which we'll talk about today. But yeah, so I've created this membership, this community platform where I get to, more affordably and effectively help more people in this pursuit. In addition to that, I am a published author. I wrote a book called The Playground Leader, which even before I became a mom, I started out in community development. So while I was doing my master's and my doctoral studies, I worked in faith-based community development. And what I learned there was as I was, working to see our cities become more whole, I was convicted that all these wonderful efforts just needed a more holistic approach. Like we can't address problems in our cities and our communities if we're not looking at them holistically. And I was working with young people at the time and just seeing this, missed potential in these gaps because they weren't being viewed as the leaders they were meant to be in those moments because they weren't being developed holistically. And so that was like the initial seed for the book. But God actually prompted me abruptly to write this book several years ago after I became a mom, just to give parents and people working with young people tools to take a more holistic approach to developing our young people. So I'm a published author as well. On top of that, being a mom of two boys keeps my plate really full, but it's really related to my work as well, because people always ask me like, Autumn, how do you get your kids to eat healthy? Or, I'm just super intentional about living holistically with them, wanting them to like volunteer and taking the time to allow them to ask questions and manage their emotions and mindset well, and all the things. And so that's all like really
Mm-hmm.
important to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I do have a few more hats, but we'll focus on those for now.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. So you preach it, you write it, you teach it, and you live it. Going back to something you said in your introduction, you mentioned six areas of our being, six domains. What are those six areas?
So our spiritual well-being, physical,
Mm-hmm.
mental, emotional, social, and economic. And so the first four, like I could really look at theologically, scientifically, because God's got a science, God's got a art. Like it's actually incredible when you start to understand how God made our bodies, because we could integrate practical holistic tools in our day-to-day lives to help us be aligned. But when you understand what it's doing to your body physiologically, it like, to me, it makes me just want to like just give thanks to this incredible God we serve, because it's insane how integrated even those
Right.
things are into our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
how our emotions, how
Mm-hmm.
our mind, like all of it. And so yeah, it's
They're,
pretty
yeah, they're
fascinating.
they're interconnected, and the mistake a lot of
Hmm.
us make is we separate them, or we give um, unbalanced attention, unequal attention to the different. I call them domains.
Hmm.
I'm a developmental psychologist, and in my field,
Mm.
we teach that there are um, in the field. It's taught that there are four domains. That's why I asked you what the six are. Um, and in my field, Rosemary's field, there are five.
Mhm.
And that's the physical, socio emotional, educational, physical, social, emotional, educational, and spiritual.
Mhm.
So your six are divided up a little bit different, but I believe they still address all of it. Physical would be economic. Then you have educational. Then you have social, emotional, and
Mhm.
spiritual. Those are the five
Mhm.
domains.
Mhm.
Those five
Mhm.
domains, I believe, cover the same six domains that you're talking
Mhm.
about. Still complete,
Mhm. Mhm.
cover the complete man. The
Mhm.
focus that we want our audience to hear today is being spiritual is good, but being spiritual alone is not good enough. Being
Mhm. Mhm.
spiritual while your body, your health is falling apart because you're eating poorly is not good enough. Because you're not resting
Mhm.
enough, it's not good enough. You can't pray all the
Mhm.
time, pray for hours and not sleep. You can't be getting up
Mhm.
early
Mhm.
every morning and going to bed late and not getting enough sleep. You're so spiritual, but you're physically falling apart. Neither
Mhm.
can
Mhm.
you be focused on your marriage and your children and your household, being raised in healthy, strong relationships, but everything else is falling apart. That's what we're
Mhm.
talking
Mhm.
about today. So,
Mhm.
Autumn,
Absolutely.
I want you to tell the audience, to you, how do you define a holistic person? How do you define a holistic life or a holistic self? What does that look like? And then we'll talk a
Mhm.
little bit about how we get there.
Absolutely. And to your point, and to answer this question, to me, our spiritual formation's the same side of the coin as physical health, mental, emotional. Like
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
it's all the same. And so when you try to separate it, that's where you feel
Mm-hmm.
unaligned. But yeah, so how do I define like holistic well-being or wholeness? So the reason at the very beginning of this episode, spoke about the word shalom, because I think that if
Mm-hmm.
you look at all the things, if you
Mm-hmm.
look at, God's desire for us to care for the poor and the oppressed, if you look at his call for us to steward our bodies, steward our relationships, like all of these things ultimately are to reconcile us with God and with one another and with our world. And so, like in a nutshell, I think the idea of the pursuit of shalom for communities and ourselves, not just individually, but we are also intimately integrated with one another. Like that is like the most beautiful picture that I can imagine, is just like this pursuit of shalom or wholeness, you know. And
Okay, hold on,
so
hold
when
on,
you
hold
start,
on, hold on.
Mhm,
I love to give
mhm,
definitions because sometimes we talk with the assumption that people know what we're saying,
for sure.
right? There is a deeper, more complete definition to shalom.
Hmm, hmm,
And I want the audience to get that it's not just peace. What when you say
hmm,
shalom, what are you what are you conveying? So when you say that and we talk about a holistic life, it makes
hmm,
sense to the hearers.
hmm,
Yeah.
hmm, hmm. Yeah, I actually have a huge in my very, very thick dissertation.
Oh, I know
I
what
have
that looks like.
I know. I have this like whole section defining shalom. It's same thing with holistic well-being. Like somebody might hear that and think that it's only the mind body or something. And
Right.
so I do agree with you. Definitions are really important. So when I say shalom, um, it cannot be isolated from a relationship with God, right? Because the spiritual component's essential. It also can't be isolated just as an individual effort apart from other people. And so, to me, shalom being a much bigger picture than peace um, is health and well-being in all of these
There you
spaces. So
go.
then,
Nice.
then you're lacking, you know, you're addressing brokenness, you're addressing
Nice.
hurt, you're addressing
Mm-hmm.
pain, you're
Mm-hmm.
addressing lack,
Mm-hmm.
and you're moving towards abundance in the way of every single one of these spaces. And so you can't have true shalom without talking about all of them. And
Amen.
the interesting thing is, before I was looking at these six, if you will, domains as it relates to shalom or wholeness
Mm-hmm.
in individuals and leaders, that this conviction really started by looking at our communities. And if we're trying to address brokenness in communities, you can't do so in by isolating any of these one areas. So if you want a healthy, revived, restored community, like in this pursuit of shalom, for example, which includes all the people in it, it has to be a holistic approach. So when I say shalom, it's, it's healed, it's restored, it's health, it's well-being in every area.
So,
And
so
so in our yeah, go
go,
ahead.
go ahead. Finish up.
I was going to say, so in our personal pursuit as individuals, like if we want wholeness and true alignment, and that's what I mean by shalom, like that's why like being intentional about setting goals in all these spaces is important. And it's January 2025, so it's a good time to
Good
start
time to do
thinking
it, right?
about.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
So going back to that that holistic piece, I
Mm-hmm.
worked with the homeless for 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um 13 years. And I worked with low income families for many, many years. What the system does is throw or offer material resources to these individuals, mainly without addressing the emotional deprivation, the underlying, the root cause of these social conditions. Same thing with incarcerated individuals.
Mm-hmm.
it's not a complete approach. It's not a wraparound approach where you call it
Mm-hmm.
wraparound services, where services
Mm-hmm.
connect to one another to address all the needs possible or that are visible, that are identified. So that's what we mean by taking a holistic approach to address whether it's individual, family, community concerns or needs, where we not only offer one service to address a problem, or usually it's the symptom that we're addressing. That holistic approach usually
Mm-hmm.
goes to the foundation, the root cause of
Mm-hmm.
the issue, to then
Mm-hmm.
address it from bottom up, not covering the visible observable symptoms, but to really
Mm-hmm.
address and cure, reverse. If I'm trying to make it really plain so we
Mm-hmm.
understand what
Mm-hmm.
we mean by holistic
Mm-hmm.
approach. So that
Mm-hmm.
these strategies that we're talking about here, and we haven't gotten into concrete strategies yet, can be applied at the individual level and at group levels as
Mm-hmm.
well. Is that correct, Autumn?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, 100%. It just requires a lot of intention. And I also think that's why I always say it's a very selfless act to take the time to work on your own holistic well-being, because the world around you will be better for it. I'm going to be a better mom. I'm going to be a better community member. I'm going to be a better leader and team member when I take care of myself. And then also you will understand, it will click differently than when you go out to help other people, because you will
Mm-hmm.
understand that in order to be most effective, we need to care about the whole
Right.
person.
Yeah. You're
Mm-hmm.
filled up. You can't pour out into others if you don't have anything in your container. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that it's January, and a lot of people reset in January. A lot of people um, make resolutions, which I don't do. I don't do resolutions. I set goals, measurable
Mm-hmm.
goals, with
Mm-hmm.
dates on them. That's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever
Mm-hmm.
we do, whether it's goals or resolutions or whatever we call it, I want you to talk to that career person, that mother, that church leader, that student, um, that is not aligned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and know they need to be aligned, but I don't know how to do this. Life is so
Mm-hmm.
busy, and I have my hands in a ton of things at the same time. I wear many hats. There's a lot of demands on me. I'm there sometimes. I feel like an octopus many days. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what practical tips, one or two, three, would you give that person? Where do they start? What do they do to
Mm-hmm.
begin to move in this direction?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have so much empathy for this person that you're talking about, because like that's me. I've got 10,000 things going on, but I never sacrifice my day-to-day rhythms that support my personal alignment. But I do want to, I know a couple very, very practical things that I would love to share right away for that person, because I can easily talk about, where I would start if you want to know how to spiritually be better, physically or emotionally. Like I could give you very, very practical things to do within those buckets. And I spent some time talking about that on my podcast as well. But to start, I think what would be most helpful for your audience is, first of all, um, it is recognizing you have to create margin in your life.
Mm,
Okay, things do not just happen. I love this word margin
mm,
because it is implying. So, for example, if it's my desire to love your neighbor, right? Because it's one of the biggest callings, in
mm,
Scripture: love God, love your neighbor. Okay, it's not just going to happen unless I leave margin in my life for that, where I'm not rushing off, where I might be moving briskly. I've been told that I like move fast. We're like, oh, to slow down. But mentally and emotionally and spiritually, I have margin in my life. So when I see my neighbor, I will take the time to like connect with them. And so I think it's being intentional about leaving margin. And it doesn't have to be a lot. Let's say your life is just so full. Well, I tell people it takes me 15 seconds to do my greens and gut health shot in the morning. And it takes another 3 minutes to make a nutrient dense healthy smoothie, for me and my kids. So sometimes like it's just starting with small steps. And I talk about this in my book a lot, just one foot in front of the other, build it one brick at a time. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, you might have all these things you want to start to do. Start somewhere, because I've actually done a really deep dive in my research on what's physiologically happening in our bodies around motivation, because sometimes we wait for motivation, and I say don't wait for
mm,
motivation. My other biggest tip, besides finding margin and kind of breaking things down into smaller goals to kind of fuel that motivation, is to it totally just like came and left what I wanted to say. Oh, to do things when you don't feel like it. That is literally probably one of the most helpful mindsets that I could, encourage you to instill, because
Say
otherwise
that
you'll just be
again.
sitting
Say that
around.
again, because a lot
Yeah.
of times
Mm-hmm.
we go by our feelings. I really like that. I really like that
Mm-hmm.
one, because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times what we don't feel like doing is what we should be
Mm-hmm.
doing at
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
moment. So
Yes,
listen,
exactly.
listen, guys. We really want to put something in your pocket today. We really want to put some
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
tools in your hands today. And I,
Mm-hmm.
I really
Mm-hmm.
like that one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do
Yeah.
that thing that you don't feel like doing.
That you don't feel like doing.
I don't
And I'll
feel like
give you
having a
a
salad.
exactly.
I've been eating cookies
Exactly.
all week, and I really am enjoying
Yeah.
these. So instead of going out and getting another pack of cookies, make a salad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I level everything up. Like you want to enjoy it. Like one of my favorite things is like making healthy food taste good. Like I don't like to cook, but I also love to eat healthy and I love food to taste delicious. So guess what? I taught myself how to cook. I could make a lot of things in a short amount of time for me and my kids that so a healthy life doesn't have to be a miserable life. It could be an incredibly
Hmm.
enjoyable life, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
let's say you know you should get outside and go for a walk for your mental and physical health and even a prayer walk or listen to some music, but
Hmm.
you do not feel like leaving your house, right? Like sometimes it's just making yourself do the thing. And I'm a strong believer of this because I did this whole kind of deep dive into how do you live well in the suck? Because we need to do things we don't feel like. That's going to happen even if your life is pretty good right now. But
Hmm.
what I'm running into a lot, even just with my, work with intentionally loving your neighbors, is it's hard out here for people. And so I wanted to really relate and connect to the person that's feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And during my hardest seasons where so many things outside of my control were bringing in added hard. And what I made sure that I did is no matter how I was feeling, I was going to do the things that I know I needed to do to keep myself spiritually well and physically well and mentally and emotionally well. Because when I got out of that kind of like, pit, if you will, um, I I was continuing to contribute to a foundation of wellness. And so, if anything, it's finding a way to remind yourself regularly that even if I don't feel like doing this, I'm going to do it anyway. But guess what? When you do that, it will fuel
Yeah.
it's a
Yes.
positive
Yeah.
feedback
Yeah.
loop
Yeah.
because you're like, oh, I'm starting to
Feel
feel
you to
good.
do
Oh,
more.
that was the right.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So first of all, don't try to fix everything at at the
Not
start.
at once.
Right. Identify an area, a manageable area. Single out an area that you need to improve in, and then go for it. It's
Yeah,
like
and
it's
I wouldn't even exactly, and you don't even have to necessarily single out one area, just choose manageable goals. So if you were to list
mm-hmm,
all six of those domains and say, okay, spiritually, I know I could do XYZ, but I'm going to be really intentional about doing this thing.
mm-hmm,
Same physical, maybe you want to exercise more and you want to eat better and you want to manage stress better and you want to get more sleep. Well, set like initial one or two small goals. Like maybe I tell people sometimes, set an alarm to go to bed. Like if you catch yourself just like drowning in some stuff, like set an alarm to go to bed. Make sure you're getting your rest. When you sit down to spend some time in prayer or reading the word, like take some time to breathe because
mm-hmm,
breathing
mm-hmm,
stimulate deep breathing stimulates your vagus nerve, which is incredibly powerful for stimulating inner calm. Like
mm-hmm,
our nervous system, it doesn't matter how much you're doing certain, spiritual practices or reading books, if you don't physiologically make your body calm down, it might just be staying in a state of fight or flight because you're so stressed out.
mm-hmm,
Like breathing, just stack that onto another habit that you have and it will do amazing things for your body, your physical health, your emotional health. And so, it could be just picking one or two small things in each of those spaces that you want to focus on.
mm-hmm. I have another question. Why is it so hard for many of us today to live a holistic life or be aligned? Is
Mm,
it lack of self
mm,
care? Is it lack of self
mm,
compassion? Is it lack of
mm,
knowledge? Is it the
mm.
hecticness of the society we live in? Is it what is it? Why is it? And this speaks a lot to women, because mother, wife, um, involved in ministry, everyone calling you to do things. You don't share your concerns because we're not to talk and be strong. Be a strong woman. What's going on? Why is this such a absent thing in so many of our lives?
Yeah. So of course, everyone's context is unique. So, what might be kind of getting in the way for one person could be different for another. But I'm going to list a few that I think, I don't like to generalize, but like in general, I feel
Mhm.
like could be potential barriers. So, um, the first thing I want to address is I think that people are waiting on something that will never come, and that's an ideal time, like waiting for this perfect balance, or I'm just going to wait until this happens, I'm going to wait until that happens. So my one of my words of encouragement and to address like why people are out of alignment, I think it's because they just keep putting it off. I'll get to it tomorrow, I'll get to the next day, I'll get to it, and then a whole year passes and you still didn't get to it. And so it is like putting a sense of urgency around things. One of my favorite MLK speeches actually talks about this fierce urgency of now. Okay, now we always want to be grace filled because I have an intense self critic. So I for those out there who are like that, like don't get hard on yourself because you missed a beat. Just get back up and get back to it. So always be super grace filled towards yourself and towards others around you. But I think like putting a sense of urgency on things, because people don't, come down with a chronic illness like overnight. It's habits that, people have been bad habits that people have been integrating day after day after day after day. And so I say, like, number one, change your mentality of waiting for the perfect balance or the right time. One of my favorite quotes is, don't wait for the perfect moment, but take the moment and make it perfect. And so with that being said, I like to use the word rhythms. I talk about this a lot because rhythms, and I grew up playing basketball, so I'm a huge basketball fan. My kids play basketball. So when I talk about this as analogies, when you look at life in pursuit of rhythms to help you with aligned living versus finding balance, you're going to be way more encouraged, because think about how God created our world anyways. Everything happens in seasons. It's ebbs and flows. It's ups and downs. The season of life, maybe if you're parenting a newborn versus a teen, or maybe you're pushing a tight deadline for a job, and then you have a season of a little more relaxation after that. Life is full of seasons. So if you view your healthy habits as rhythms, it'll change your mindset, because that means, let's say you have a goal to go to the gym for an hour 4 times a week, and then all of a sudden you hit a season of life that's just chaotic. It prevents that. Maybe financially you can't, or time wise you can't, or whatever. Instead of just saying, well, I can't go to the gym, in basketball, you pivot. If you're out of a move, if I can't do one thing, I could pivot and then get to a different position to where I can then make a different move. And so my move in that season might be doing, 10 minutes of yoga and 15 minutes of strength training in my house, and then walking 10,000 steps, parking further away. So I have to walk more when I go to run an errand or something. Like in different seasons, instead of scratching your habit altogether, pivot in what it looks like, and how it looks and whatnot. And so that's one tip. When you're asking, like, why are people struggling to find alignment? I think it's like this mindset shift of like, don't just like wait for this perfect balance or until things fall in line. Just do it now. And then the second thing, however crazy or chaotic it looks, just do it, because you'll start to feel more peace when you're like in this pursuit. And then the other thing is assessing your priorities by being super honest with yourself. Self-awareness is like, I will preach this from the rooftops, because when you allow yourself just to be super honest with yourself and take it to God, take it to a friend, whatever you need to do. But when you have really, really honest self-awareness about the why behind things, like, why am I struggling for this? Why am I not aligned? Why am I not doing a better job with this? Or when you ask yourself those questions, it brings you to a place of realization. And then don't allow yourself to make excuses, right? Because if we're justifying and making excuses, what self-awareness and honesty does is say, you know what, I'm done with that. I'm done with that. I'm going to acknowledge, where my challenges are. I'm going to acknowledge where my barriers are. I'm going to try to set my environment up for success, so that if I know there's no way in heck I'm going to the gym after work because I'm just exhausted, figure out how to do it earlier in the day. You know what I'm saying? It's just a practical example of just being really honest with yourself. So I think those are a couple reasons that we kind of struggle in this pursuit, is because our priorities are off, because we haven't had those honest conversations. We think maybe, and part of that honesty too, I'll speak to kind of what you were saying earlier, is like, let's say, for example, a mom that's carrying 10,000 things, a job and volunteering kids and all of that. Sometimes we will justify sacrificing things that we know we should do because we're like, oh, I'm too busy doing this or I'm too busy doing this. Well, think that you are one setting an example for your kids, your team, whoever you're around. And and so when you really sit down to list out your priorities, you have to realize that taking care of yourself needs to be a priority.
So,
All
so,
right.
so, how does one realize this? How, because
Mm-hmm.
you touched on self-awareness. I'm big on self-awareness, self-worth, self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Those three things.
Mm-hmm.
I've done some work in that
Mm-hmm.
area, but sometimes people go on year after year after year.
Mm-hmm.
They're not aligned, but they're not aware. What could um, potentially open up a person's eyes to
Mm-hmm.
see that something needs to change in my life?
Yeah, this
What
is
are
a
some things
really,
that do
really,
that?
mm,
Mhm.
that is such a great question. And I actually, just for fun, I'm such a nerd about this because I'll just survey people randomly, like, why do you think you keep self-sabotaging? What do you think's going on there? But to your point, like, what do you think? Might break this cycle, and there
Mhm.
always needs to be a catalyst, and that catalyst could look different
Yeah,
for different people
yeah.
because if you can hear information, but until it's important enough to want to integrate it into your own life,
Mhm.
you just won't. And so I think sometimes accountability is the
Mhm.
key because
Mhm.
once you start building in habits for yourself, you realize I don't want to feel that way I was feeling before.
Right.
I
Exactly.
like being more connected with
Exactly.
God. I like
Mhm.
having more
Mhm.
control of my emotions. I
Mhm.
like feeling
Mhm.
healthy. I like
Mhm.
having energy and not being tired. But to get to the point where you've spent enough time building in those healthy habits, um, you even changing thought patterns, right? That will change some people's lives, changing thought
That's
patterns.
right.
And
Mindset.
so sometimes that catalyst is just someone coming alongside and saying, hey, let's do it together. I'm a strong believer in accountability because
Yeah.
then when you don't feel like it, you're not just letting yourself down. Like, hey, me and this
Mhm.
other friend, we're like in this together. So if you know that you're like, I just don't really feel like I have the self discipline right now, just like make that call and
Yeah.
find
And
somebody
I,
to do
I,
it
I
with.
agree with
Mm-hmm.
you because it does look different for everyone. That misalignment could be um, manifesting itself in physical illness, um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
emotional imbalance, missing your goals, missing your targets, not being motivated, not strategizing. It could show up in so many different ways. I talk
Mm-hmm.
about three
Mm-hmm.
D's: desire, discipline, delight. And
Mm-hmm.
they're from one gradation to the next. We may want to be aligned. That's the desire. Now we need to develop the discipline with whether it's with or without an accountability partner, employing all those strategies you mentioned, starting somewhere, doing it even when we don't feel like it. That's where we're going to
Mm-hmm.
develop the discipline. The delight then will come when we see the rewards and we see that
Mm-hmm.
it's making me feel better. I'm hitting the mark. I feel more rested. I have more energy. I'm more focused. I'm more clear. I feel closer to God. Then the desire will begin to come for more and more of that. So that's
Mm-hmm.
even another way to look at it in
Mm-hmm.
folding in all of what you just shared with the step by step implementation. And I love the idea of accountability partner. We don't have to work out by ourselves. Not everybody can do that. We don't have to
Mm-hmm.
read through a particular chapter in the Bible by ourselves. We don't have to study the Bible by ourselves. We don't have to pray by ourselves. Sometimes we need to do that, but we can develop our muscles and our strength by being with someone, having that accountability partner along our sides.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why
Mm-hmm.
we are here to partner with
Mm-hmm.
someone to get from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I hope that these pieces are coming together for our listeners to really look at how we can put some things in place to have
Mm-hmm.
that aligned life. It's a
Mm-hmm.
powerful topic, and it may not be
Mm-hmm.
super spiritual. Some of us are so spiritual that we want Bible verses. It
Mm-hmm.
may not be that, but this is where the Lord wants us to be healthy, because we can't serve right, we can't pour into someone else unless we ourselves are healthy, and not
Mm-hmm.
just physically healthy but holistically
Mm-hmm.
healthy. So
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
is where we're going today. Autumn, I have not given you an opportunity to tell the audience where they can find your book, where they can find you, where they can tap into your resources. Take some time to do that, please.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Can I leave one last word though? Something you said that just I
Absolutely.
wanted to. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so just one more kind of catalyst if somebody finds themselves kind of struggling. But I will mention if somebody like wants the theological understanding, well, one, if you go to Genesis 1 and how God created our bodies, if He created our bodies to thrive when we eat nutrient dense foods, then we probably should do that. If He put a nerve in our body that helps us, be healthier and have better rest and less stress when we breathe, then we probably should do that, And so, plus, if you look at the entire, four gospels, Jesus spent his entire, time focused on caring for people holistically, right? So when you're looking, you can see it absolutely everywhere.
Yeah,
And one
yeah.
of the guiding points of my dissertation was in Colossians 3, where it said, do all things as if doing them for God. And so I literally show up in my life doing all things in a way that loves God and loves my neighbor. Okay.
Okay,
And
one more.
so,
One. I want to add to that. And a verse, my pivotal verse for ministry is 3 John 2. And I wish above all that you would prosper,
mm-hmm,
one,
mm-hmm,
and be in health, two, as
mm-hmm,
thy soul prospereth.
mm-hmm,
That
mm-hmm. Yeah,
covers all
absolutely.
the
Amen.
domains.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. It
Yeah.
sure does. So this last catalyst, and then I'll tell people where to find me, is decrease your barriers. And so what I mean by that is put things in your schedule, make things available. If you're forgetting to do something, like put it in front of your face, like decrease your barriers to success. And that's super practical thing to do. Just when you're having a moment of inspiration, just put the stuff in your calendar or like set the meeting up or take the first step. And
Mhm.
so decreasing your barriers to success, I think, is a really important thing. Um, so yeah, I wanted to leave listeners with that. As far as where to find me, you can contact me directly through my website, autumnswain.com, because you could email me through there and I get all those emails and I respond to all of them.
Mhm.
I also respond to all of my direct messages on Instagram, and my Instagram is at Dr. Autumn Swain, so at Dr. Autumn Swain. And so either Instagram or my website works perfectly. And I could access and respond to all of that. If you wanted to learn a little bit more about the work that I'm doing, you could dig into my website a little bit more because I do have some additional content there. Of course, my podcast, Aligned
Mhm.
Living with Dr. Autumn, is another place to find me. And so, anyways, yes, that
And your
I
book, your
really
book,
appreciate.
your book. Is it
Yeah,
on
my book, my
Amazon?
book. My book is on Amazon. If you go to my website, I have an author page where I have a whole video, 5 minutes or so about my heart behind the book, and then direct links. Yes, you could find it on Amazon, The Playground Leader. And yes, thank you for reminding me about that as well.
Awesome. So, that is a clear indication that she's not here to promote her book. She's here to give insight. I had to remind her. I actually forgot. Usually, I give multiple opportunities for authors to tell the listeners where to get their book.
hmm
But we are
hmm
just here today speaking from our heart and
hmm
wanting to get your attention, especially
mm
at the beginning of a year. This recording is
mm
perfect. I had it scheduled for a few
mm
weeks down. I might just drop it out earlier than
hmm
I planned because it's a lot of us reset around this time. I know I
hmm
do. I love to
hmm
recalibrate and just to look forward to starting a year with a focus, a clearer
Yeah.
focus. And so we're hoping that this is getting someone's attention. My life is cluttered. I'm
mm
juggling too many things. And because I'm juggling so
mm
many things, I'm not getting anything done. What can I
mm
show for 2024? So going into
mm
2025, I'm going to clean some things up. I'm going to
Yeah.
decrease my barriers. Listen,
hmm
yes, I'm going to make this moment the moment instead of waiting
mm
for the moment. So that's
Yes.
our encouragement to you today.
mm
So that when
mm
we are here in 2026 and you look back at 2025, I can say, I have put some things in place and I'm
Yes.
now more aligned than I was a year ago. That's our goal. So, women of God, men of
Absolutely.
God,
hmm
people in general, hear the word today and make it practical in your life. So, I'm going to ask Autumn to give us any final words she have, and then we'll close out.
I suppose the last thing that I would say is just know that when you are taking the time to integrate these things for yourself, you are also doing them for all the people around you
Great.
that you have influence over. All right. So, like I write about this a little bit in my book, but like my kids are going to pick up more through osmosis and seeing what their mom does than what I say. And same thing if you're a leader over a team or initiative or whatever it might be. When we integrate these things into our lives, it's not only going to bless you in so many ways, finding aligned living, because it's just going to be filled with so much more peace when the pieces are coming together. But just know and tell yourself, play the mental game if you need to. This isn't just for me. This is for the people around me that I care about. And so that's like, I guess, the last word I wanted
I
to
love
leave.
it. I love it. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
People out there, audience, listeners, viewers, we love you. We pray that
Mm-hmm.
this was a blessing to you and an inspiration. Again, this is All Things Faith Walk. My name is Rosemary Downer. You can find me at booksbyrosemary.com or Books by Rosemary on Instagram and Facebook, or Books by Rosemary Downer. Books by Rosemary all over the place. You can find me, email me, follow me. That's right. On my website, there are tons of resources, books, play cards, therapeutic play cards, workbooks, devotionals. Check me out, Books by Rosemary. Thank you again for joining me on another episode of All Things Faith Walk. May 2025 for you look better in every way than how 2024 looked. Love you.